Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of the AstroMiner space shooter DevVenture. So in the last live stream, in the last episode, we were trying to establish a new way of managing all of these steering behaviors, and we wanted to compile them into a finite state machine. All right, and if you remember from the diagrams, I wanted to have it something like this, where you've got, 1 second. I need to get used to that part. Okay, so we've got this thing. You've got the NPC steering manager, and then attached to all of that, is all of the behaviors, right? So behavior seek, behavior flee, behavior wander, and so on. And what's going to happen here eventually, once we've got everything sorted out, is that the NPC steering manager is going to monitor. Well, it's not going to monitor, but it's going to respond to any signals that happen either from the enemy itself or from the enemy controller. Remember, we've got this global controller, something like almost like a hive mind, right? And that hive mind will send signals to the enemy pirate or the enemy NPC, right? Because again, we want this to be as general as possible, and then add on specifics as we go for each type. For now, it's literally just going to be that you play as the defender, and your ally is a mining ship, and the enemy is a pirate. All right? And then as we move on, we'll add in the other game modes. But I don't want to build on too much of the other game modes into the demo right now, because like I said, we build on layers, right? And what we want to do is we want to get at least one game mode working properly, and then create a demo from that. And once I have that demo, I'll publish the demo and take it onto Kickstarter, and you guys can support the continuation of this development as you've played it, right? You play the demo, and you know, once you found out that the demo is something that you actually want to support, you go ahead and support it. But in the meantime, if you don't mind, then share this video and all the other ones with as many people as you can. And you know, if you are able to, then do support my my work at coffee.com/mtkdev. I would really appreciate your support. And speaking of support, now is a good time for me to put to make my shout out to Cubes, our junior DevVenturer. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. And I want to extend the invitation to the rest of you to become a DevVenturer, supporter on my coffee page. Let me just go there, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So here is my coffee page, and you'll see that there are 3 kinds of memberships, right? So there's the intern DevVenturer, the junior DevVenturer, and the senior DevVenturer. And you can do a once-off payment. If a monthly subscription is not for you, then go ahead and take the option to do a one-time donation. And your support is very much appreciated, and thank you very much for it. But if you want to see the perks for the memberships, then let's go through that now while I have that while I have the window open, right? So you know, you've got the perk of supporting this channel, as well as having your name listed in the YouTube credits, and in this case that comes across as a shout out. I'm still working on having a credits at some point in my live streams. And then there's also the Discord role for the intern DevVenturers. So let me show you that as well. Then you guys can join the Discord server as well, right? So this is DevVenture with MTK, the Discord server. All right. As you can see, there's the DevVenture content, right? So any DevVenture I do, which is a development adventure in whatever topic. At the moment, that is DevVentures with my space shooter game. But it could be anything. It could be a DevVenture into procedural generation, or a DevVenture into learning how to do shaders in Godot Engine, or a DevVenture in Blender, for example, or an environment setup. Right, setting up an environment in another engine. Could be Unreal, could be Godot, could be anything. And all of these things are DevVentures. And each one will have its own playlist. If it doesn't fit into a single live stream, then I'll compile it into a playlist of its own. All right. And anytime a new video is uploaded, like today, you'll see here, my Sapphire bot or app will let you guys know that there's something new that I've published to YouTube, and it will include the link, and you guys can go ahead and see it from there. There are also announcements that I will make. So for example, here you can find the Inktober challenge I did last year. Although this link is now old, I'm not on Buy Me a Coffee anymore. I should actually change this. But yeah, so you'll see here, there's YouTube content, and then there's Coffee content. So anything that I've uploaded to Coffee, you'll see it here. Anything I upload to Fab or Gumroad or Substack, you'll find it over here. And then then there's text channels as well. So general, memes, programming, and so on. So art, 3D design, or just design in general, and then DIY electronics and 3D printing. So I will eventually build up my offerings into DIY electronics and 3D printing. But for now, I want to get further with my space shooter, and then also expand into other kinds of DevVentures in a different time slot to this one. All right, so I'll keep this slot available for those who are following my space shooter DevVenture, and then I'll open a new time slot with a different live stream for any other miscellaneous DevVentures that I start. And then once I do, I'll open a third slot for my DIY and electronics and 3D printing DevVentures. So I hope that this has all made sense, and that you guys are actually interested in joining my, my Discord server. I hope to see you all soon. And in case you're wondering, here are the role restricted channels, right? So you've got the intern DevVenturers, which have their own intern DevVenturer content, intern DevVenturer chat, and their own voice chat, right? So you guys, once you become intern DevVenturers, can have voice calls with your fellow intern DevVenturers and get to know each other, as well as any of these higher tier DevVenturers. If they want to join your chat, they can, because that's the way it works. Like a junior DevVenturer, for example, has access to the junior DevVenturers category of all these channels, right? So they access the chat and the content and their voice chat, but they can also access the intern DevVenturers. And the senior DevVenturers have access to all three, because if I go back to the coffee page, I'll show you this, right? So here you see the role restricted channels on my Discord server is a perk listed for the intern DevVenturers. So they'll get this category, whereas the junior DevVenturers get everything from the intern tier, including the category, right? And on top of that, they also get the junior DevVenturers category. And then the senior DevVenturers get everything from the last two, so from intern and junior, as well as a monthly live stream between me and them, right? And a Discord role with exclusive access to the senior DevVenturers content, as well as the other two, because again, as I've mentioned here, they have all the rewards from the previous levels. Okay, so it builds on top of the others. It's not just having specific perks for each tier. Okay, enough of that. Thank you very much for those who decide to support the channel. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you in my Discord server. Now, let's get back to what I was talking about over here. Okay. We want to be able to have our I'm just trying to think of the phrasing. The enemy ship controller, right? We want the enemy ship controller to be able to understand what's going on in the scene. Okay, and the term for this is called scene analysis. And it's going to understand, or at least keep track of, it's going to monitor the progression of each enemy ship. All right, what it wants to do is it wants to know at regular intervals, or at the very least at checkpoints, right? It wants to know what each enemy ship is doing. Okay, so that the bare minimum is when signals are sent around, right? So when a signal is emitted, the enemy ship controller needs to know. Okay, basically it's going to say, hey you, enemy 1, head over to this location, or hey you, enemy 1, do this particular thing, right? Seek this target, or flee from this target, right? And then the enemy controller is going to say acknowledged, right? It's going to acknowledge that request by sending either a confirmation signal, or it's just going to do the thing, right? So the very simple implementation will not have any acknowledgements. It's just going to be the enemy ship controller will emit a signal of instruction and expect that the recipient of that signal will do as instructed. It's not going to care whether the recipient has received it or even has acknowledged or even received it. It's just going to say, hey you, enemy 5, go over to this waypoint, and once you get there, let me know, right? And it doesn't care that the enemy 5 has received that signal or not, or acknowledged it or not. Then enemy 5 will go ahead and do it, right? And then once it's done that, once it's reached the target or completed the objective, right? So the objective was to seek waypoint 17, for example, right? It seeks out waypoint 17, and then it sends a signal. It says, hey, I've reached waypoint 17. And the enemy ship controller goes, amazing. Now you need to go to waypoint 12. Okay, and enemy 5 isn't going to complain and say, hey, but you just sent me to waypoint 17, why do I need to go back to waypoint 12? It trusts that the enemy ship controller has an overview of the scene that it doesn't. And so off it goes. It turns around, does this kind of arc, almost like a parabolic arc from waypoint 17 back towards waypoint 12, and perhaps that was supposed to be some kind of strategic maneuver that the enemy ship controller wanted this enemy ship to do, okay, to create some complex behavior. It was like, okay, I need to create the sequence of events, right? It needs to go to 17, then it needs to go to 12, and then it needs to go to 5, and then it needs to go to 16, and then only does it start attacking, you know, to throw the player off or whatever. And all the while, the enemy ship doesn't complain or question or argue. It just follows the instructions. And when it does the objective, it sends a signal. And the enemy ship controller waits for those signals. And it only moves on to the next stage of its grand plan once it gets that signal, right? So once it gets the acknowledgement of that objective's completion. Please bear with the lawnmower outside. unfortunately, I can't mitigate a lawnmower in my recordings. He will periodically bring the lawnmower a bit closer to the window, and it will be audible, and I do apologize. So what I was saying was, we want some communication between the enemy ship controller, which is not featuring in this drawing. So over here, this thing. Just switch back to normal cursor. Here we go. Okay, so the enemy ship controller needs to send a communication regularly with an enemy ship's NPC steering manager. Okay, and then it's going to the steering manager is basically going to be the thing to determine which of the steering behaviors it's going to use, right? If you think of a technician, right? A repair technician whose job it is to repair something. Let me just think for a second. Maybe we'll go with air conditioners, because today is quite stuffy. So we'll go with air conditioners. So maybe you've got this technician whose job it is to repair an air conditioner. Okay. And he's got this box of tools, right? A toolbox. And he analyzes the situation of the air conditioner, figures out what's wrong with it, and chooses the particular tools he'll need to fix this particular air conditioner. Okay. So the technician in this example, the air conditioner technician, is the NPC steering manager, and the tools are those steering behaviors. Okay. And now you want this analogy to expand even further. Then what is the enemy ship controller? Well, that's the company that's employing this technician, right? The manager or the boss or the entrepreneur who runs the company, whatever it might be, right? And this manager or boss will send that technician to a particular address and say, hey, so-and-so, would you please go to this house at this address? They have called us to repair the air conditioner. And so the technician says, okay, I'm going to go there. And then off he goes. And maybe that would be the seek behavior, right? Employing one of his tools, his phone, with a navigation app. I'm not going to mention any names. Not going to encourage any brand name support or whatever. But like, he employs a navigation app, off he goes to the location. That's seek complete. Then once he gets to the job, maybe this is a micromanager who is in charge of this technician. He goes, okay, let me know once you get there. Then, okay, he has to now report and say, hey boss, I've reached the address. I'm gonna go ask the owners of the house to show me the unit, the air conditioning unit. And then the boss goes, okay, cool, let me know once you get there what the problem might be. And so he's like, okay. Then he goes in and he goes maybe on a little wander around the house, right? And then once he reaches the air conditioner unit, he discovers the problem and he reports back to his boss and he says, hey boss, I found out the problem, and unfortunately I'm not currently equipped to fix it. Right? There's a part that we need to get. And then the boss goes, okay, well, go get it. And then he calls the behavior flee. And he flees from the address, right? He runs away and he goes to fetch the part. Then he seeks the address again and comes back, and so on, right? So these are all the tools and behaviors that he employs when he's doing the job, right? And all the while, the repair technician is communicating with the boss, right? With the boss, who happens to be this enemy ship controller. I don't know why I keep switching to brush every time I switch a scene. So yeah, okay. Enemy ship controller is the boss, right? The singleton. And he's not just managing so-and-so. He's managing such and such as well, right? He's managing... Okay, we'll use actual fake names. So like, he's managing John Doe, and he's managing... Johnny Sand, and oh, maybe John Doe and Jon Snow, or Bill Sand, and he's managing multiple technicians, right? So that's what the enemy ship controller singleton is doing. It's managing enemy 1, enemy 2, enemy 3, enemy 4, enemy 5, however enemies there are in the scene, and each enemy is reporting to the enemy ship controller, and the enemy ship controller has no time for anything else, right? It's literally just got algorithms in the back, some pattern, right? It's like, okay, I've got this pattern that I want all the enemies under my control to follow, right? And maybe this would be pattern 1, maybe it would be pattern 2, and patterns are all these predefined maneuvers, right? So it'd be like, I've got 5 enemies and I want 3 of them to do a direct assault, and I want 2 of them to do some kind of wing flanking setup, right? So maybe that would look something like this. Let me just do that. So I'm just going to draw a little box here in the corner and zoom in. Nope, doesn't work. Zoom in. Okay. So if we've got this as our scene, something like that, then what we want to do is, I'll show you this, right? So we've got our enemies. Switch back to paintbrush. Okay. Then we've got 5 enemies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And we want them to do some kind of pattern, right? So let's say this is pattern 1. We say, okay, well, enemy 2, 3, and 4 will lead a direct assault on whatever the target is, right? Perhaps this would be some kind of mining vessel. So let's just do that. Let's say it's a mining vessel, and let's color that in with mining vessel colors, which is like a darkish golden bronzy color, like a dirty gold, right? Then the mining vessel is over there, and we want the other 2 who are over here. So that's enemy 5 and that's enemy 1. We want them to do some kind of indirect maneuver, right? So what is this tool called? The freehand path tool, I suppose. Let's draw that. So wrong color. Switch back to red, and maybe not do that. We'll do Bezier curve instead. So it's like this. How does this work? Okay, you have to press enter. Now I understand. So you drag it out to the side you want, and then you let go of click, and you drag it to make it curve. Then you click to confirm. And if you want to add another segment, you can, but don't. Then you press enter to confirm it. Okay, that makes sense. Once you get the hang of it, of course. But before that, it kind of doesn't. Anyway, let's draw the arrowheads like that. So maybe this is pattern 1, right? The sun is kind of shining in my face, so you'll have to excuse my moving around a little bit. We'll go back to this. So this will be called pattern 1. Let's write that down over here. Make it easy to see. Okay, so I'll just bring my tablet up into a place where I can actually write better. And then off we go. So this is pattern Still trying to make each character a single stroke and as efficient as possible so I can eventually get faster with them. And that's an underscore and 1. Right? Pattern 1. And then this would be enemies 1 through 5. So this would be enemy 1. Well, actually, it would be enemy 0. Because remember, this is an array. And the number on the label is only for human understanding. So enemy 1 is actually position 0 in the array. So that would be enemy 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So enemy 4 is actually the 5th enemy in the sequence because enemy 0 is the first one. But yeah, okay. And then let's say this wasn't mining vessel 0. Let's say this was actually mining vessel 5. The 5th one, which is actually the 6th one, because this one happens to be done with its loading of the cargo, right? Maybe its cargo hold is full and it's returning to the capital ship, and somehow the enemy ship controller has figured this out. It doesn't automatically know. I mean, it does, but it doesn't in quotes know automatically, right? Even though it has that information in its background, it has to fake ignorance, and it only in quotes discovers that this mining vessel has a full cargo hold once it's been monitored for some time, right? So maybe there are pirates who are following it, or perhaps it's identified through observation from the pirates, right? So enemy pirate 3 has realized that mining vessel number 5 is on its way on a direct course back to the capital ship to offload its cargo. Remember, these mining vessels are not maneuverable in the same way that a defender or a pirate is. So in order of agile to least agile, right? So most agile to least agile, it would be the pirate is the most agile, then the defender, and then the mining vessel, right? Mining vessels are basically, if you think about it, they're like armored vehicles, and all they do is travel in the most direct path they can, right? And they rely completely on the defenders to protect them. So when an enemy pirate sees a mining vessel is making literally a straight line towards the capital ship, it kind of has to be that this mining vessel is going to offload its cargo, which means the cargo hold is either full or close to full, because sometimes there might not be enough space. I know I'm talking quite a lot without doing much, but you have to bear with me. I'm trying to fill my intuition about the situation before I go on a convoluted plan and get myself stuck in a rabbit hole and have to dig myself out of it. But let's just keep things as high level as we can for now, until I have a full grasp of what it is that I need to do, and then I'll build my way down towards the bottom, because I tend to work top down, and I think you've kind of picked up on that. If you followed my live streams this far, you've kind of realized I like to plan things from the start and break it down from a high level to a low level understanding, and then implement things in a piecewise fashion until that particular segment is complete, and then I move on to the next one, and the cycle begins anew, right? So here we have this situation, right, where in this example, enemy 5 is on its way back to the mining vessel, the cargo ship, the capital ship, to offload the cargo, and it could have a full cargo of multiple resources, right? Or it could have an almost full cargo hold of a single resource, and there's a difference, right? So maybe it could be that it wanted to go and collect the second type, right? Maybe it was collecting iron and it wanted to go collect silver, right? But there isn't enough space in the cargo hold to facilitate the gathering of silver in a worthwhile fashion, right? So it's too much trouble for what the silver is worth. I have 75% of my cargo hold full of iron. Let me go and offload the iron, and then I'll go on a dedicated hunt for the silver. Okay? And so this is the deduction that the enemy ship controller has made. It's like, okay, well, it's either got a full or a close to full cargo hold. So all pirates go for this guy, right? Take him down and employ pattern 1. And then if you go back here to the what is this now? Here. If you go over to the NPC steering manager, then each of these enemies will know what pattern 1 is, right? And it knows its own ID, right? It knows its own ID, so it knows, okay, well, I'm enemy 0, you know, I'm John Soap. John Soap. Wait, no, it's not John Soap, it's Joe Soap. Thinking of these anonymous names, right? So Joe Soap is enemy 0, right? He knows his ID. So Joe Soap knows he's the 0-1. So he knows he has to do the left flank. And Rob Sand knows that he has to go on the right flank because he's enemy 4. Whereas the other 3, you know, John Doe and the other 2, I don't want to come up with other names, but like the other 2, so enemy 1, 2, and 3 will go on a direct assault, right? So they'll go on a direct assault knowing very well that there will be some defender somewhere around enemy 5 waiting for this type of attack, right? And he's going to be waiting for them, and he's going to be fully engaged with those 3, right? So they're going to be keeping him busy, while the other 2 sneak around on the flanks and attack from the sides. And maybe there's another defender, maybe there isn't, right? But the point is, the enemy ship controller has seen fit to employ pattern 1, right? And it's not the job of the NPC steering manager to know why the enemy ship controller has called for pattern 1. All it knows is that I am this number enemy, I'm enemy 2, for example, and when pattern 1 is called as enemy 2, that I need to do this behavior, whatever that is, right? So there's a match. Remember I showed you the match here, you know? There'll be a match with the pattern number, and, well, actually, it'll be... Yeah, it will be a match with a pattern number. So if the pattern number is pattern 1, then in the result, there'll be a second match, right, for the ID number. And basically, you can have nested matches, right? Let me just confirm this with DeepSeek, just so that we have a full understanding of things. Okay, so here we have it. In GD script, is it possible to have nested match statements? I'm thinking of doing a pattern-based strategy and tactics system for my enemy ships. I won't go into the details yet, so don't you go there either, but I wanted to check if this is a feature I could employ. Okay, so yes, GDScript supports nested match statements. You can nest them as deeply as you need. Alright, so you could say a match with enemy type. If it's a scout, then match the current behavior with patrol and attack. Which is amazing, right? So that fits exactly as I wanted to do, right? So what we could do then is we could say match with the pattern number, and then depending on the pattern number, have a match for the enemy ID, right? So if there is, so the patterns would obviously be called based on the number of enemies on the scene, right? And so that would be a separate match block in the enemy ship controller itself, right? Where the enemy ship controller will say, the enemy ship controller will go ahead and say like, okay, well, we've got 5 enemies in the scene. That means I can only use pattern 1, pattern 6, or pattern 12, for example, right? Because these are the only patterns that support 5 enemies. And of those patterns available, I think pattern 1 will work the best. Okay? And then that handles the case of what happens if there aren't exactly the right number of enemies for the pattern, right? And then you've got a match block for the enemy ID, right? So if I am enemy 3, then I'm going to employ this steering behavior. But if I'm enemy 0, I'm going to employ that steering behavior instead, right? And so now it's got this, you can build up all these complex strategy and tactics patterns that that will engage the player and not be so boring, right? It won't be this boring, straightforward algorithm that the player can learn and defeat, and it'll be the same thing every single time. So I hope that you all understand what I'm talking about, and that that you're able to follow with my explanations, because this is the way that I'm going to be going forward with it. All right, if you don't understand, or if you have some suggestions on how to make this work even better, then by all means go ahead and write your comments in the comment section. I encourage engagement in my videos. I haven't been receiving much engagement, but I do encourage it. And as long as you keep things, you know, as they say, keep it clean, right? So please do be constructive with your criticisms if you do have any. And if you do have feedback, then always just be polite, and let's try and keep our community as positive and healthy as we can, right? So I think that covers everything, right? So now we know more or less what we want from the big players in this new component of the game, right? This new feature. So now, instead of managing everything myself in my head and forgetting things and making mistakes, I want to use DeepSeek to help, right? And so there's this, okay. Let me take the time right now to explain exactly how I'm going to be using DeepSeek so that I don't have to keep defending myself about it or giving you any wrong impressions about how I use this AI, okay? For the most part, since I started doing live streams on this particular DevVenture, everything I have done towards the space shooter, like 99% of the things I've done towards the space shooter, I've been doing in the live streams. I haven't been touching the game outside of the live streams, except in a few rare occasions where I was like this close to fixing a problem, and I happened to fix it within 5 minutes after pressing stop record, right? I don't spend much more of my time or my energy on these, on the space shooter outside of my live streams. And the reason for that, again, is my channel's offering. The offering I give you as my audience is a vicarious experience in game development. Okay, so for those of you who do not actually develop games and are curious about what it's like to make games, that's what I offer, right? All of the hardship, all of the, the problem solving and being stuck with a bug and having to figure things out and plan ahead, and the thought process and, the sequence of events and structure of workflows, all of that stuff, right? You'll learn how game development actually goes through the motions by watching this channel and all the live streams I do. And that's why I try not to cut out any of the long pauses or whatever, because I want you guys to see that it doesn't actually work the way you expected. Like, it's actually a lot harder than it looks, but it's also actually a lot simpler than it looks at the same time, right? And it takes longer than you think, but it also goes quicker than you think at the same time, in different ways, right? So different aspects go faster than you thought, and some aspects go slower than you thought, and some things are harder than you thought, and other things are easier than you thought, and so on, right? So that's the offering that I give. That's the value of my channel, all right? And I do use DeepSeek to make it go a little bit faster, but also I use DeepSeek to lighten the cognitive load for myself so that I'm able to communicate with you, right? Because remember, if I wasn't doing the live streams, then the cognitive load of having to explain everything I'm doing could be directed towards actually developing the game, right? So because I'm diverting some of my mental resources, my cognitive resources, to doing the live streams, I want to make up for that deficit with using an AI, right? So the AI will pick up the slack on all of the parts where I fall short because of my need to communicate things to you, right? And I'm not using the AI as a developer. It's more of an assistant, right? So I'm doing the development, I'm doing the design, I'm doing the development, I'm doing all of the thinking, I'm doing most of the problem solving. Sometimes I need to ask, like you've seen, I need to ask DeepSeek to help me think through something. But for the most part, I'm doing the development and the design, right? And DeepSeek is literally only helping me if I get stuck, or it's helping me keep track of a specific plan or path or a roadmap that I want to follow, or that kind of thing. So this is how I use DeepSeek, right? As a development assistant. And not as some of these people call a vibe coder, right? So I hope I never have to explain this again, right? But I really do think that it is not inappropriate to be using AI if you know how to use it responsibly, okay? And if you don't, just maybe I'll do a live stream about this where I explain how to use AI in a way that isn't considered vibe coding or bad practice or error prone or whatever like this. There's this community that is literally built around criticizing people who use AI to do the development for them, right? And these are the what I call the vibe code bashers. And you know, there's a specific subset of people who use AI who might fall under this category of what they call a vibe coder, right? But many others who use AI who wouldn't fall under that classification. So yeah, I think I should probably do a live stream about making that distinction and what actually is a vibe coder and what isn't a vibe coder, and how you prevent yourself from being a vibe coder. But for now, let's not go into that. Let's just focus on using the AI in a way that isn't shunned. So, what was I going to say to this guy? I said, don't worry about the details yet. I just wanted to know if I could have nested match statements. So now let's go into the details. All right, so like, okay, then we can go into the details about my idea. There are three key players in this architecture. So let me just separate this and then begin. All right, so one, the enemy ship controller singleton. This strategy and tactics system is meant to create dynamic and diverse set of behavior patterns for my enemy ships. This will create a more engaging experience for players and prevent the game from becoming a solved problem. Players will not be able to learn the enemies. Enemy ships' behaviors easily, thereby getting bored with the game. Okay, there are three key players in this architecture. The first one is the enemy ship controller singleton, and so the enemy ship controller singleton manages all the enemy ships in the scene. It is responsible for the strategy, and directs the enemy ships to follow behavior patterns. It uses signals to communicate with the enemy ships, and receives signals from enemy ships to keep track of their progress, because monitoring positions and states every update is unnecessary computation. Okay. It is not concerned with the specific behavior, the specific behaviors employed by each enemy ship. Just it only cares that the overall objective is complete. Okay, and then the second player is the NPC. The NPC behavior management system. The behavior manager, the NPC steering manager. I think I should actually keep it as a behavior manager rather than a steering manager, because you want this thing to manage shooting, and to manage mining, and to manage pinging and navigation and all of those other behaviors as well, right? So we'll keep it behavior manager, and we'll change it in Krita as well. But let me finish writing this, and we can change it in Krita when there's time, right? And if not, then I'll do it after the live stream, but I'm going to mention that I'm going to do it now, right? Just so that you guys can have a record of my intentions to make that change within the live stream. Okay, so the NPC behavior manager is a component of the enemy ships, and it receives the signals from the enemy ship controller, singleton. It is not responsible for understanding why a particular pattern was chosen. It only cares about how it can employ or how it can fulfill its responsibilities that's not the right it's how it can fulfill its responsibilities towards the chosen pattern. Okay, let me read through this again and make sure it's all coherent. Okay, so the enemy, or rather the NPC behavior manager, is a component of the enemy ships, and it receives the signals from the enemy ship controller Singleton. It is not responsible for understanding why a particular pattern was chosen. It only cares about how it can fulfill its responsibilities towards the chosen pattern. The NPC behavior manager deals with the tactics of the scene. No, the NPC manager it decides which behavior to invoke from the collection of behaviors. Attached to it as children nodes. And the third player is the behavior underscore behavior name. Is a specific operation that manages the steering, movement, attacking, or any other behavior specific, or any other behavior of the enemy ship. It receives a signal from the NPC behavior manager or maybe not a signal. It is invoked. It is invoked by the NPC behavior manager, because remember, it's a child node of the NPC behavior manager, and each enemy ship has its own behavior manager, right? So if it emits a signal, it's going to notify all enemy ships in the scene that something has happened, and we don't want that, because maybe it's going to call the seek behavior for its own of its own, you know. I'm Joe Soap and I'm going to seek the target, right? But if it uses a signal, it might end up calling all enemies to seek the target, and we don't want that. We just want Joe Soap to seek the target, and the others are going to follow their own move set in this pattern, right? So Yeah, so it's invoked by the NPC behavior manager. And it runs its operations it's invoked by the behavior manager and it notifies the enemy ship controller, or maybe, and it emits a signal with its enemy ship ID and the status of the behavior. Once the operation is completed. For example, in behavior seek, the signal emitted would include the ID of the ship and the ID of the ship, the target it reached or didn't, and the status of the task, I.E in quotes completed, like target reached, or interrupted or destroyed, or etc. The signal would vary depending on the behavior chosen. There is probably more I need to tell you about this, but this is all I can think of right now. Okay, so let's just go over this again and then we can close the live stream. I know we've gone a little over an hour already, but I did need to put this down in DeepSeek just so that we have it. So when we start in the next live stream, we can pick up directly from here. Okay, so now that we know we can have nested match statements, now we can go into the details about my idea. This strategy and tactics system is meant to create a dynamic and diverse set of behavior patterns for my enemy ships. This will create a more engaging experience for players and prevent the game from becoming a, in quotes, solved problem. players will not be able to learn the enemy ship's behaviors easily, thereby getting bored with the game. There are three key players in this architecture. 1. The enemy ship controller Singleton manages all the enemy ships in the scene. It is responsible for the strategy and directs the enemy ships to follow behavior patterns. It uses signals to communicate with the enemy ships and receives signals from enemy ships to keep track of their progress, because monitoring positions and states every update is unnecessary computation. It is not concerned with the specific behaviors employed by each enemy ship. It only cares that the overall objective is completed. 2. The NPC Behavior Manager is a component of the enemy ships, and it receives the signals from the enemy ship controller Singleton. It is not responsible for understanding why a particular behavior pattern was chosen. It only cares about how it can fulfill its responsibilities towards the chosen pattern. It decides which behavior to invoke from the collection of behaviors attached to it as child nodes. And 3. The behavior name, this particular type of node, is a specific operation that manages the steering, movement, attacking, or any other behavior of the enemy ship. It is invoked by NPC Behavior Manager, and it emits a signal when with its enemy ship ID and the status of the behavior once the operation is completed. For example, in Behavior Seek, the signal emitted would include the ID of the ship, the target it reached or didn't, and the status of the task, i.e. target reached, interrupted, destroyed, or something, right? And the signal would vary depending on the behavior chosen, right? So for example, shoot might not have as many variables like the ID and the target and the status, or maybe it would have more, right? Maybe it would have an additional part to the signal. But yeah, depending on the signal, you might only have the 2 variables, or more than 2, or 5, or 6, or however many. Okay, and then there is probably more that I need to tell you about this, but this is all I can think of right now. All right, so this is a really well thought out architecture. The separation of concerns is excellent. Your three-layer architecture, we've got the enemy ship controller, the NPC behavior manager, and the behavior nodes. And it's just going over a summary of what I've said. This naturally fits nested match statements, and the key benefits: it's decoupled, it's extensible, it's maintainable, and performant. This is a professional grade AI architecture that will definitely prevent solved, in quotes, solved gameplay. What specific behavior patterns are you thinking of implementing first? So we'll go through this again at the start of our next live stream. I don't want to go through it now because, again, we are basically almost 10 minutes over time. So I'm going to close things off here. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. And again, a big shout out to our junior DevVenturer. Thank you very much.